So we're joined by two people who are integral to the movies you've been seeing lately. I've got John DJ Desjardin, who is the VFX supervisor on Zack Snyder's Justice League, Godzilla versus Kong, and the upcoming Flash movie. And Bryan Hirota, who heads the Scanline team, who's worked on all those films. And you guys are in London right now working on the Flash.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Right.
I want to make a note before Bryan goes that also he's not only supervising the Scanline team, but he's stepping into the role of second unit visual effects supervisor on this movie. You heard it here first.
Oh, congratulations.
There.
Right. And I was going to say, I may or may not be working on this movie.
Well, that's why your guys' offices are so stripped bare. You don't want to give anything away.
His isn't. You should walk in there. It's like the war room. I have nothing in here, except I will say over there is our friend Kyle, who is prevising the entire movie. Here, we'll do this. Kyle, wave.
Hi, Kyle.
Wave. Okay.
Ooh,
Everything on your screen.
He's got the whole movie over there.
Too. What's that?
He's got the whole movie over there.
Yeah, it's all right there, actually, but all you can see is a screensaver.
Could you explain what previs is? Because that's a term that's coming up more and more these days that fans are hearing about.
Kyle, explain previs.
Oh, pre-visualization is the process of using low-resolution models to pre-make the movie and pre-shoot it with the director before you go and film it, so that they can plan ahead and make architectural drawings of all the shots and help these guys figure some stuff out.
You were ready to go.
That was the most coherent answer you'll get all during this time.
Is it unusual to previs an entire film? I mean, I know sometimes that you previs sequences, but is an entire film unusual?
I don't know. What do you think, Bryan? Not these days, probably.
I don't think for a big movie and or a movie like this. What I would say, we're not prevising 100% of the shots in this movie. You know, there's some stuff that just exists in storyboards.
Right.
Like the dramatic sequences. They're not like, how would this look?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of it. We tend to, I think, as a rule, it's kind of goofy sometimes to watch previs that represents acting moments, you know, where two characters are talking, and that should be like for the director and the actors to interpret more than what we tend to previs, which is more visual effects related, which also I should say dovetails with what stunts and second unit directors might come up with, which is their own stunt viz. So a lot of times it's a mix of storyboards, stunt viz, and previs that can give you a whole sequence. And that can actually exist in an Avid for a long time, right, Bryan? Usually we get that to work on.
Is this a little like what animation has done, you know, in terms of doing the storyboards before they will animate the film? Is that kind of like, because like, how is this different than storyboards? You know, because storyboards have been used forever in entertainment. How is this different from that?
Well, because storyboards exist, you know, primarily, and this isn't 100% true, but primarily they exist as hand-drawn things. They have a difficult time accurately representing which camera to use, how far the camera needs to move, what the actual size of the space you're filming, what actually are you filming versus what's virtual later versus what's a second pass that you shoot to composite together. So it's a more true to life version of the scene that you'll shoot than storyboards in
that's
general.
Cool.
That's a really good distinction, because I think traditionally storyboards are a very quick way for a director to convey to the rest of the crew, this is what I'm thinking about for the scene, but it's not always location or set specific, right? Because maybe that's being worked out at the same time. It's a very quick 2D sketch of what the intention is. And previs is the next step in that, which hopefully takes into account, you know, what the art department and locations departments are working with to get the film made.
So the Flash just started filming, but you guys have been
we're
there
in
for a
double
long
digits
time.
now, baby. We're in
What?
paid number 10. We're in double digits.
Wow,
now.
that's fantastic. You're moving along quite fast.
Yes.
So but you guys have been in London for a long time. Bryan, how long have you been there?
I got here mid-February.
Yeah, and DJ, how long have you been there?
Not as long. I got here mid-March, actually, about a month after Bryan got here. Yeah.
So why do you guys need to be on set so early for VFX?
We probably should have been here earlier, actually, but yeah, go ahead, Bryan.
I was gonna say, but why? It's similar to your question about Previs. Like in pre-production, there's a lot of like the way a movie gets done. You have a bunch of departments that are all sort of working together to try to, realize a director's vision for the film. And a heavy visual effects movie like this, you're going to need to weigh in a lot on what happens in some of these shots or how it's filmed. So, you need to plan it out. And so, in the months leading up to before the camera rolls, you're working with the director and with the other departments to sort out what you're actually going to do when you get the actors on set and the cameras on set.
And maybe another question that should be asked, Grace, is how come we weren't there earlier than we were? And that answer is because we were trying to finish Zack Snyder's Justice League and we couldn't really easily get out here and do this. But to that, I should say that Andy and Barbara and all the filmmakers were really respectful of what we were trying to do to finish that, and kind of made room for us to do that. We did a lot of work from LA remotely, interfacing with London to help with that pre-production process as much as we could.
That's so cool. So what we're going to do for this interview is we're going to talk about these three films, and we're going to start with The Flash. But of course, everyone should keep in mind that you guys can only say so much. So I'm going to try and ask you questions that don't spoil anything. So the first thing I want to ask you in regards to the upcoming Flash movie is, what is going to be the biggest challenge with this movie, you think, VFX wise?
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, without saying anything, there's just Kyle's laughing over there. There are a lot of things, and I don't really want to talk about them because they'll kind of give away maybe some of the technology and some of the fun stuff, some problems that we've already solved. I would just say that Andy's got some really interesting concepts of ways to extend the look and the vibe of the Barry Allen Flash, the Ezra Miller Flash, the Zack Snyder Flash, that we kind of gave you a taste of in Justice League, and kind of goes on from there. And I really don't want to say anything because, Bryan and his team have been doing a lot of conceptual R&D to get a lot of these concepts and things nailed down really successfully, I might add. And they are, I think Bryan can back me up on this. Some of the ideas are super, super strange and very intriguing because of that.
Yeah, I have no comment.
Well, Bryan, you did a lot of the VFX work for Flash in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Just, can you answer, will it look the same as that, or are you guys going to do more?
I have no comment on that either.
That's good. That's a good sign. That's a good sign. That's great. So how is it on set so far? I hear that Andy Muschietti you guys have already been saying great stuff about him. I hear he's a really filmmaker a lot of people enjoy working with. How's the vibe on set?
Yeah, I think it's pretty good, right, Bryan? I mean, we were just kind of talking about that today.
Yeah, I think we're really lucky. We have a lot of really wonderful people here, and Andy's great.
Yeah, and I think all the departments look. But we were kind of noticing, like, Bryan and I have worked together for how many years now? What are we saying?
Almost 30.
Wow, congrats.
Almost 30. That's amazing. That's cool. We'll have to celebrate that somehow, Grace, when we get to the 30th mark. But
got to figure out what the 30th anniversary gift is.
Right. That's actually a good question. But yeah, we were actually commenting the other day that it's an interesting time, I think, in our lives doing this work, because there's a huge difference between, like, in the 90s where people were trying to figure things out. We knew a lot about what to do, but not completely everything to do because we were still figuring it out. But I think filmmakers were really going through a process of figuring out what all these new tools were, and they didn't completely have a good idea for it. There were a lot of questions. There were a lot of maybe mistakes made along the way shooting. But, I feel like everybody's pretty effects savvy when it comes to working on this movie, even with all the new stuff that we're doing. And there's a lot of respect for what goes into it from our end. And, it's been great. Everyone's been really pleasant. I mean, that's the best thing about it is, everyone's pleasant and respectful of, what everybody brings to the table. And that makes for a really good working experience.
That's fantastic. Have you seen a change, Bryan, over the years in terms of?
Oh, no, for sure. Outside of the visual effects department, the other departments that visual effects will primarily interface with, people have a lot of experience now in a general feel for what approach we might suggest to do and how that relates to their job, which makes things a lot. It makes the working environment a lot better and the relationship between the departments better.
That's fantastic. So let's talk Zack Snyder's Justice League. You guys said you guys had a very shortened window to work on that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, usually I think you wanted like a year and you got it's like 6 months?
Yeah, it ended up being, I think, about 7 in total, but it was, to me, it was cut in half for sure.
What was it like unearthing all the files and everything, all the work that you had done years later?
Well, I know from our end, sometimes it was a fruitless search, but maybe, because from our end, we started with what we thought our archive was from Warner Brothers. But, I kind of came to find, to speak completely freely, that it's almost like when the horror of ending that version of it was done, it was kind of like some kind of, event, like a Bermuda Triangle event, where if you probably went through our offices, everybody was suddenly gone in a moment. And there were like cigarettes still, smoking in ashtrays and cups of coffee still hot. Like we all just disappeared off the face of the earth. And I don't think anything was backed up very well before we left.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So because of that, and look, that's not to say everything was gone. There were some assets that were backed up in the archive. Just, it wasn't as extensive as I think we would normally do it. So because of that, Bryan should speak to that. I think we relied on the facilities a lot more and their own internal backups to get us through the forensics nightmare that this project definitely was.
Yeah, but like on our end, right? Like, I don't remember what the time gap between finishing the theatrical and starting up on Zack's was, but it was 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And when we put the show on ice, we didn't archive it with the intention of being able to resurrect it and start working on it again. So I think we had 7 months. That sounds about right to work on it. We spent the first month easy just de-archiving the show, finding out, because technology moves on, some stuff will still work, some stuff won't work. And DJ speaks of forensics. Spent a lot of time just diagnosing shots, because like on the surface, like this shot, seems like what Zack wants in his movie, but because of the story change or this or that, maybe there was characters like policemen or something painted out of the plate that because to fit the other story, but they need to be in this one. So there was a lot of digging into old work and really sort of analyzing the elements in it in the context of the new cut to see if this is correct or not.
So you had to undo some of the other work that had been done to get it back to the original state.
Yeah.
Kind of, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. That's crazy. So that's even more work.
Well,
because there's a lot.
Sorry, Bryan, go ahead.
I was going to say, there was a lot of work to undo work, and Zack's extended aspect ratio, because the theatrical was all hard masked at 1.85, which just means it was narrow. So any of the work, above 1.85, between the 1.85 and the 1.23 on the top and the bottom, that work wasn't done. And so even if you had a shot that was 100% fine, it was too narrow.
Oh,
so, no. There were shots that were de-archived and re-rendered and recomped just to fill in the gap on the top and the bottom.
Oh, that's crazy.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is there were all these different categories from our end of what those states of the shots were, and I also want to say, I think the best backup situation actually ended up being Weta, because when we talked to, the head of the facility, David, he said to us that he thought he actually had everything still online, because they were just, I think when we were just finishing that show, a long time ago, they had just instated the idea that they would keep everything online for a certain number of years. And so I kind of found that we had a lot of stuff readily available to us, there, but we still had an aspect ratio problem. And so it was hard, because you'd have this shot's a final, but it's not right. We have to fill it in. Can we fill it in? And, and Zack and his editor, Doty, they really wanted everything 1:3:3 if it could be, because the only way out of it, if you don't have anything, is to, I'll use my own window as an example, is to, crop the sides and take the middle out.
Oh, and just blow it up.
Blow it up.
That's crazy.
Well,
yeah, you're undoing a previous film. You're filling in for the new aspect ratio, and it's double the length of a normal film, and you have half the time to do the work.
Correct.
So I think it's incredible that you got it done.
I think Bryan and I agreed many times. It's probably easier in that 7 months to do every shot from scratch, rather than like having to do that, all things considered. It's just crazy. And the other funny thing too is the nightmare of like having final shots, but having to change certain elements, that went on for a really long time. I remember right before I came out here, and I believe, Bryan, you were in London already. Remember, we got the word from the IMAX screening that there was one of Bryan's shots early on where Aquaman is going to the Cave of Inheritance to talk to Volko. That whole scene got changed in theatrical to be, one, the scene didn't exist, and two, it was changed to be like this trail of dead parademons that leads to the fight that happens there. And it turns out there were little tiny dead parademons or Atlanteans that we couldn't even discern, since we were all working remotely from home, in the middle of the frame, really tiny. But Zack could see them when he went to check it at IMAX. And Bryan and I talked about, well, do we have time? Can we take it out? And we ended up taking it out. So,
that's right. You did it all from home.
Yeah.
That's insane. So, you Ezra Miller was so beloved in the Snyder Cut. And you guys, were a big part of the success of that performance. How did it feel to see fans do a 180 on the character?
I thought it was appropriate.
Yeah, well, I guess I would say, like, we helped with the VFX, but like the performance, if they love it, I mean, that goes to Ezra.
Oh yeah,
like Ezra and Zack, like they crafted that barrier.
And I would say a lot to Chris Terrio too, for they wrote these long arcs to most of the characters, that finally are in this version of the movie that weren't in any version before that, or weren't in the theatrical, I should say. And so it's nice to, the visuals we did backed up that, gave weight.
Well, people loved that. Like when he turns back time in the third act to, to save everybody.
Well,
many
it's funny
people, that's their favorite scene in the film.
It's funny because that was always in the story. Like that was never, we shot that way back in 2016, and it was something that, I don't know what it was, the mood of the studio at the time. They just didn't get it. They, to be honest, they're just like, I don't understand this. And maybe it was the previs nature of it or the post-viz nature of it or whatever. But it was one of the first things they threw out after they pulled Zack off the movie, sadly. And I'm really, really happy with the work that Bryan did on it, because, Bryan hadn't had a chance to touch that scene before, and so this was all brand new to him. I had lived with it for years, and the spec for it never changed. And I had some early, like post-viz versions of it that I could show him. But, I really loved the sort of the breadth and depth and scope that he gave those big ideas that are in that imagery.
Well, it's amazing. Bryan, when VFX started out, a lot of the times it was, oh, this building explodes or this happens. But, there's such an artistic element to the Flash's sequences in Zack Snyder's Justice League, with the way the lightning will spiral out and everything like that. How was it having such an artistic aspect to your work, to go from, nobody could tell you did it, to really creating these gorgeous pictures?
Yeah, I don't know. Like we've been lucky and had a lot of fun dealing with Ezra's Flash. Like when we were shooting Justice League, they inserted a cameo of him into Suicide Squad. And we were far from in a place where we were going to do any Flash shots. And they're like, we need a Flash shot in 4 weeks or something. So like they pulled Ezra aside, they shot this thing. And, we kickstarted because DJ and I had been talking about ideas and we've been talking about them with Zack, but we hadn't actually done anything, and then suddenly they needed one. So, we put the effort into overdrive and came up with something that, we came up with a look and a language that we liked and people liked. And that really helped jumpstart the effort on that. And then, when we were working on Justice League, we got to do some stuff and some of I think the ideas that were a bit more interesting, like the idea of this quantum flash with like the rocks falling down where he's in multiple places at once.
Oh, I love that.
Like that stuff unfortunately didn't make it into the theatrical, but it was cool. It was a cool bit of R&D that we did. Happy that it came back in Zack's version.
Well, remember, Bryan, that stuff was done. That actually
it was 100% final. And so
it still got cut. That's crazy because it's like so cool.
Yep.
Yeah. But so that was nice that it came back. But then when we had the opportunity to do this cosmic rewind moment, like the character to me is really interesting because he exists kind of outside space and time, or he can. Yes. And it depends on how you interpret the Speed Force and things. So I think it just, and I don't even know if this really answers your question. So, but I think it's a fun character with a lot of possibilities to take him.
I think I'm already surprised with what you've done with the character, which is why I'm so glad that you're working on him on his own film. Because obviously you can't say again what you're going to do, but I have faith that you're going to make it even cooler.
Well, what's funny is I remember a long time ago. And this is pre-Godzilla versus Kong, and this must be maybe right after we'd finished the theatrical, and I was going to take a bunch of time off, and Bryan and I were talking about what might we work on next together. I'm like, well, I'm going to take a bunch of time off, so we'll just connect up when that's done. Who knew it was going to be Godzilla? But I remember we did speak specifically because we knew that the studio, that Warner Brothers, was trying to do some kind of a Flash movie. Like Ezra was always attached. And I remember talking to a couple of the visual effects executives there because they were like, well, what would you do? Because I was like, I don't know that I want to do the DC universe anymore. This left a huge bad taste in my mouth. It's like, let's move on, and then they said, well, would you do a Flash movie? And I said, yeah, I would do that. I would do the Flash movie, because I remember, Bryan, you and I were always super interested in that. And
right, I thought the character, I find the character really interesting.
Yeah. And I don't know about, I know that at the time there were a couple of other versions floating around that I have to admit, I never read the scripts, but from what I heard about them, I wasn't that interested in that, thematically. And plus I was taking a bunch of time off and it didn't matter. And then we were off doing Godzilla. But when Andy and Barbara asked to meet me to talk about this, and considering the script that I read, I understand exactly why, given my past with the rest of the DC universe. It was easy to say yes to that. It was like, oh yeah.
That's a great vote of confidence to go from feeling like you didn't want to come back to saying yes to this. So I think that's really exciting about the project, the Flash movie.
Yeah. No, it was definitely exciting. I think I called Bryan right away and said, I read this script faster than I've read any script in a long time. I said, I think you're going to like this, which I think you did.
That's fantastic. Well, let's talk Godzilla versus Kong, also for Warner Brothers. First of all, I have to ask, Team Kong or Team Godzilla?
Oh, I can't. I'm probably a little bit of team both, a little bit of team both.
Bryan?
Like as an idea, I like Godzilla more. I think, I think I have 2 Godzilla t-shirts and I don't think I have a Kong t-shirt. Like in this film though, like definitely Kong's the more sympathetic. Like if you're only talking about this film, like Godzilla's treated like a force of nature. Like an act of God. And, like Kong is the character that you follow, in the movie and root for.
Yeah. So
I think you could say I'm Team Titans. I like the Titans. I like the monsters.
Yeah. Team Kaiju.
I hate the humans. I always hate the humans.
Yeah, I'm like, get them off the screen. I want more. Well, I have to say, with the kaiju, with the Titans, with those sequences, how much of that is VFX percentage wise?
Of the Titans?
Well, like when you're doing like the Hong Kong battle, how much of that is like, do you shoot some shots of Hong Kong, or is that like 100% VFX?
We tried to shoot as much as we could. You know, it's really hard to shoot monster sized shots in Hong Kong because there's all these like aerial restrictions. So you can't get a helicopter where you
really?
Oh yeah, it's horrible. It's a nightmare. And you know, you can do stuff on the ground, but that's not, by the time you get to Hong Kong, that's not the fight that you want to see. You want to be up in the air,
yeah,
at eye level with them. And so the short answer, which I'm making long, and I apologize, is
it's
not
great.
as much photography as we could, you know, day and night. I'm just going to say it. We sort of, you know, got some drone footage that maybe we don't want to admit to, but we did. And the purpose of all that was, you know, we had a previous scene before we even went there. And I worked with David Knoll, who I've worked with for a lot of years remotely. He's a aerial cinematographer, and he went and got as much from that previs as he could, given the height restrictions.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then we got all this other stuff, and then basically Bryan and I went through it, and I think it was our goal to anchor everything as best we could in a real shot. But I would say, like, what do you think, Bryce? 75, 80%, maybe even 90 is kind of CG City.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I fought as hard as anyone to put the helicopter plates into the movie.
Yeah, you fought harder than I did.
Yeah, like I because you know, like I knew most of it had to be, you know, big CG battles, but I think everyone would agree it's always nice to anchor stuff at least periodically with helicopter footage. So I spent a lot of time going through all the dailies of the helicopter footage, extracting little bits that I thought, hey, this could be a monster shot, and you know, putting monsters in it. In the end, I don't know. There's a handful of them that made it into the movie, but you know.
So from a VFX perspective, what are your favorite shots in the film or scenes in Godzilla versus Kong?
I can never answer that question just because, you know, there's a lot to like. You know, it's like I love the beginning of the movie because it's a quiet scene of Kong, you know, waking up and I think
taking a shower. Yeah,
taking a shower. You know, that's cool, quiet stuff. It's, you know, I love going to Hollow Earth and doing that. I love the ocean battle. It's like the first previs we ever did, and Bryan just like knocked that out of the park, you know. And I really love. I think once the ocean battle happens, and it just goes, you know, and it's just like one cool thing to look at, you know, after another. At least that's what our goal was, and I feel really good about kind of reaching that goal, you know. I
think you did. Do you have a favorite scene, Bryan?
I mean, I like a lot of the movie because I think it's fun. I think like big monsters fighting are fun. I think two things that stick out of my mind is I'm glad this happened because it wasn't always going to happen. There were different versions of this, but I like that Adam ultimately let us tear Mechagodzilla's head off.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
What was going to happen to him?
I don't know, he explodes, or there were just different versions of him dying.
Oh yeah, like there's the explosion. There's the
explosion thing. Right. Yeah, you know, but so like the Mortal Kombat, you know, fatality. Yeah. I always felt was the most satisfying and most fun.
And also, don't you think Adam gets good credit too for having that? He made that very visceral, not just tearing it out, but having you do the oil blood spurting out.
Yeah. And the spine hanging down.
Yeah. Well, and the whole thing, credit to Adam for his dedication for watching. We were talking about that, you know, I think today or yesterday or this week anyways, you know, like Adam has watched and probably multiple times has watched every single Godzilla movie ever made. He's a student of these things. So, you know, he had I feel like a strong sense of like Mechagodzilla needs to be extremely mean and unlikable, you know, and then there needs to be some sort of like cathartic payoff to his death.
Yeah, you got him. He was mean and unlikable.
Well, it was fun because when we got to that part of the movie, by that time we had our assets, pretty well built up. And so we got to a point where Adam could come to Bryan and me and say, I want to try, a beat where Mechagodzilla does this, and then Godzilla and Kong do this. And then Bryan would go back with his animation team and basically film it like a real event. So he'd come back to us with, here's 6 or 7 takes of that event from all these different cameras, and then that way the editorial could choose their shots like they would dailies and put the scene together. And it was funny because we'd look at these like sample cuts that Bryan would give us. Bryan and I would be usually in the screening room with Adam in Legendary, and we would just laugh because, Mechagodzilla is an asshole. He's a Street Fighter asshole.
It was a good process of continuing to just turn that knob up to make him, more and more unlikable or mean,
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool to see that you guys, a lot of times people feel there's like this old school version of filmmaking where, the director comes up with the shots they want in the sequence and then everybody just makes that happen. But it's cool to hear that everybody was working together. You guys, the Legendary, Adam, the editors, to pick shots together from the different cameras and decide how to best piece it together. I think so that makes it really interesting to think of how it's filmed. Like when you film it, you don't know how it's going to look, basically, right?
Yeah, well, like DJ was saying, like what me and the animation supervisor Eric P that we have, what we tried to do is we tried to block out, when we talked to DJ and Adam about some action that we wanted to explore, we would block out this action. Eric and I would sort of figure out,
right? In the previs.
Yeah, it was better than that. It was better than that,
Yeah,
we call it. It wasn't even post-viz. It was more like, more towards fine animation, but a blocking version of that. So the characters were pretty articulated, and the city was there.
Yeah. So Eric and I would plan this out, and he would execute this with his team, and then what I would give back to DJ and to editorial, we would shoot it with a whole bunch of cameras. Like it happened for real in the city, and we shot it for coverage. Like we'd mount cameras on buildings. So you're talking about
different cameras in the computer.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I thought you were talking about physical cameras. So you're talking about a VFX fight that you've created in the computer, and you're picking different angles where you can show it from.
Right, because we tried to emulate the process that they would do, if they were shooting a movie for real. Like if you had some sort of big stunt or action, like you would cover it, from all over the place. And then the editor and the director would pick, where to cut from one camera to another. Or if you're covering like a live event, like
that's so cool.
Like somebody in the control room of like a live sporting event.
Yeah, that is really cool.
It was very cool. And I think because we weren't actually trying to make choices for Adam, but we were trying to make choices that we thought were fun. And then he would look at them, and sometimes we'd be like dead on. He'd be like, that's the one I want, or it'd be close, so that he could at least fine tune it from there. And that was a shorter process for us to get a really cool shot or sequence rather than, some other laborious, post viz only kind of thing. I was really happy with that process. I thought it really kind of amped up the results. I think that the level of detail, went way up both in animation and look of the whole scene because of that.
Well, also on Godzilla versus Kong, you have 3 characters, including Mechagodzilla, that have personality. How was it animating characters and doing all that emotion? Because I really felt it from the characters.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about whether it was difficult or not. I felt like Kong was always easier because he's more humanoid, right? So you're going to relate to him more. He's got he's probably got more controls in his face and everything to be able to convey emotion and more ways to do it. Godzilla's a little more difficult because, like Bryan was saying, he's a force of nature, but he's also a big giant lizard. So we don't really know, facially or communication wise what they're quote unquote feeling, and then, and Mechagodzilla is the robot version of that. So it gets more difficult. But I think Adam was, I from my end, and Bryan might speak differently to this, given what he was faced with. But from my end, I thought I found Adam to know exactly what he wanted out of each one in each scene, in each shot, once we got down to that level. And he was very he was mostly really good about communicating it, so we could get it within like a few blocking takes.
Mhm.
And if we didn't get it quite right, he never settled for it. He would tell us what he wanted extra out of it. Or, like Bryan, I'm thinking about the great scene that you did where Kong reaches out and touches Gia's hand with his finger.
Yeah,
We
you did
went
that,
through-
Bryan. That's
We
incredible.
went through that a lot. That took a long time to get that the way Adam wanted it, but we got it the way he wanted it.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing I would add to that is I think Adam gave Mecha a personality, because he is a robot, like his sort of like turning to the camera and gong gong, which which I thought was really funny. Like Adam had some definite ideas about like how to give this robot guy like a personality, and like that. I mean, that's on him, and
You guys
I think
executed it really nicely.
yeah, I think the ideas are from him. I think it's funny, and I think he deserves credit for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, also something about your work in general. I know that sometimes it's you guys find it funny when someone online will say, "Oh, here's a perfect shot from a film," and they'll credit the cinematographer. And of course, cinematographers do a lot of the shots, but sometimes they'll be using one of your shots that's 100% VFX. Is that crazy to see that?
It's humorous. It's not so crazy anymore. It happens all the time. So,
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the average person on Twitter doesn't, and I don't know. I guess I don't know how much the average person on Twitter understands how a film gets put together. So, I do find it funny. I can't really go like, well, why don't you understand how this is put together? Because why would they know?
Well, hopefully people start listing the cinematographer and the VFX team, because it's really an amalgam of both of your work at this point.
It doesn't really matter that much, but I'm not as forgiving as Bryan. I'm like, I see certain pictures and I go, come on, really, come on, and
right. And it's not necessarily stuff that we've worked on either, like it's
right.
Yeah, if it's
can you spot a VFX shot in someone else's movie? Can you spot that? I know they're really hard to spot because you guys.
That's a slippery slope to get into, and I don't think maybe that's probably not either here nor there. I think back to the topic at hand. If you're shown a still that gets that kind of accolades, can you spot that it's a visual effects shot? Yeah, probably. It's like, yeah, it's usually a very obvious one that we're laughing the hardest at, because you're just like, what?
Right.
Because the question becomes, how can you possibly shoot that?
Oh yeah, where would the camera go?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. What part of that do you think?
That's a good rule.
Real?
Yeah. That's funny. I like that rule, right?
Yeah.
So your teams are huge. How big are your teams to work on a movie? Like Bryan, how many people work on?
Yeah, we go there. Yeah.
I guess it depends on the project. I think on Justice League we had 400 people. I think at its peak. I think on Godzilla versus Kong we had about 300, maybe a little bit over 300.
That's incredible. So
that's probably pretty average, though, I would say, because from my point of view, like I have a production team that's usually it's anywhere from 12 to 15 people, maybe, tops. We might have a little more depending on if we have like post-viz going on or pre-viz going on, like my friend Kyle, he might have a team too. And then, I'll interface with like Bryan, who's he's the supervisor of that team. So I'll talk to Bryan about stuff.
The way it works is you're at the top and then you're overseeing work at the different VFX houses that you bring in.
Right. And I would say, and I would say that they're all similar to Bryan's specs. So Weta would probably have a few hundred people. DNEG would have a few hundred people. MPC was on Godzilla. They probably had a few hundred people, so it multiplies really fast. And these days it's worldwide as well. So, on both those films, I would tend to start every day talking to London, and Bryan's in LA with me, unless he's in Vancouver, but we're in the same time zone. And then, so I'll talk to him anytime he wants during the day. And then I'll talk to Weta at the end of the day because they're usually starting their
That's
day.
Australia, right?
Yeah, it's New
Or
Zealand.
New Zealand or Australia?
New Zealand.
New Zealand. So
Mhm.
the reason I asked that is with so many people working on these movies, if someone watches this video and is like, I would love to do that, how does someone start a career in visual effects?
Oh, don't ask me. I started mine a long time ago. No one would do it the way I did it, and I wouldn't recommend it. So, what do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I'm not really 100% sure actually the path of entry now as well. I think there's some schools that offer programs for it, but I'm not 100% sure if that's the best way to go about it.
Well, the best way, I guess, would be to contact these companies and see if they take interns and what they're looking for new employees, right? New animators.
Maybe.
I don't know, man. I usually tell people not to do it, but
Oh, come on. You guys have become so front and center in these blockbusters. I mean,
no, that's just because we had 2 movies come out within 3 weeks, and that's never happened before.
well,
Yeah,
I can't wait. Yeah.
I was just gonna say it is a brutal grind for the whole crew. So
Yeah.
Oh, it's a grind, similar to video games, right? They have that as well.
Well, you just have to remember it's, even for us, it's like, I'm happy generally with, what I've done and what I continue to do. But like every job, there are elements of it that are a job, and hours can be long. And, I'm in a decent place now where, I'm in London and my family's with me. I've got my wife, Sarah, here, and the dogs are here with me. But I didn't have that on Godzilla versus Kong. I was away from them for 4 or 5 months, at a go. And in my past, it's hard to have a personal life, probably in all aspects of the film business, but this as well, because you have to travel. In my position as well, in Brian's position, you have to travel to go shoot the film, and you have to travel and go do pre-production. There have been movies where I've been gone for, close to a year, trying
That's
to get
incredible.
them done.
How long will you be in London for Flash?
Till mid-October.
That's incredible. That's great. But I mean, we love your work, and I really hope that more and more people become aware of how vital you guys are to these productions, because you're just doing phenomenal work.
That's nice of you to say. It's been really fun to do Zack's Justice League and kind of write the cinematic universe, correct the trajectory. I'm really proud of everything we did on that. And I'm really happy for Zack and Deb and everybody involved with that. And we had a lot of fun, working with Adam on Godzilla versus Kong. So I'm glad that things that we're sort of personally proud of, people have had a good time with them as well. That's always
that's great.
fun.
yeah, and a lot of the credit goes to the aforementioned thousands of artists that are the ones who are boots on the ground, executing the orders.
It's amazing, knowing when Brian and I started, we first started working together in the mid 90s, right? And knowing how kind of sparse the visual effects field was at the time, because there weren't a lot of artists at the time. We probably knew most of the people in LA that were doing it. It was crazy. It's amazing the amount of talent that there is throughout the world able to do this work. It allows, it makes it more fun at a certain end of it. And I think the quality and the level of the work in every movie these days, the bar is pretty high, in terms of what things can look like and what you can do, what you can achieve. I think from Brian's and my end, when it comes down to developing concepts or going into a movie, like Flash or any of these movies with a lot of complexity, there used to be back then a lot of rules of things that you couldn't do, and I don't think we have much of that anymore.
That's awesome.
We never go into anything saying, like the ocean battle for Godzilla versus Kong. It's
that's so cool to think of that. So in the 90s, you'd have to say to filmmakers sometimes, no, we just wouldn't be able to do that.
or you'd think of it, or there would be such parameters on it for how you could achieve it, that the types of shots that Bryan did in that scene, you would have to do them a completely different way. There'd probably be a lot of plate work out on the actual ocean.
Oh, I see.
Maybe a
Now-
lot of miniature work or dropping a lot of bucks in the water for explosions. And then maybe you just focus on the characters. I'm just throwing stuff off the top of
No,
my
I
head.
remember, for anyone who's been to the theme parks, they would show how they used to use miniatures to do like the battles at sea and stuff like that.
Yeah, there might have been some of that, but that's what's exciting, I think, certainly from our end now, is when you go into these meetings with the other filmmakers, there's quite an arsenal that you can bring to bear, all these artists that Bryan's mentioned included, to solve a particular problem on a show. And that's always exciting, I think.
That's great.
No, I'd agree.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. And break a leg on the Flash. We all can't wait to see it.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Grace. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you.